Welcome back to Sports Around the Bar, your weekly sports talk show. I'm Jake, your bartender, and I'm joined, as always, by Drew here on center stool, which, even though I'm the bartender, you're the one pouring the drinks tonight.
That's just how it works.
And welcome back to our 2019 NFL Power Rankings episode, where we're going to go through every one of the 32 NFL teams and talk about where they stand going into the offseason. Now, it's been an exciting season, and this list might surprise you a little bit because not all of these teams are going to instantly be where they finished last year. It's going to be about how they finished last year. It's going to be about the team going forward, what kind of cap space issues they have, what kind of free agent kind of likelihood they have of signing people. We're talking about everything in the offseason, so we are going into every little detail about these teams, and why don't we get started, Drew? Why don't we start with your number one, man, since you're the master keeper of the list. This is both of our kind of composite list. Who do you have at the top of the NFL, or do you want to start at 32?
We can start at 1.
Let's go 32. Let's keep the suspense going. Who's the worst team in the NFL going into this offseason?
Worst teams we're going to actually kind of mirror ourselves what we did last year, which proved us wrong, but we think it's just going to go that much worse than what we originally thought. And we're going to go Miami Dolphins at number 32.
We are doubling down on the Dolphins being terrible, and I got to say, after 2019, they won 7 games. They looked almost halfway decent under Adam Gase, and we were looking at this team last year in the offseason saying, who are these guys, and why are they going to be any good? Almost said something else. Who are these guys, and why are they going to be any good? And I go into 2019 saying the same thing, and even more so, we listed Ryan Tannehill as questions. That was one of our big issues with the Dolphins last year. Even beyond that, now they're getting rid of Tannehill. It seems likely that they're going to go draft a quarterback. They don't have a quarterback. They don't have any kind of wide receiver or any kind of playmaker on the offensive side of the ball. And outside of guys like Minkah Fitzpatrick, they really don't have that much of a defense either.
No, they really don't. I think, to be honest, in my opinion, one of the worst things they're doing is talking about getting rid of Ryan Tannehill. I think if anything was their highlight last year, and the reason why they won some of these games was because of Ryan Tannehill. So when you start with there and you're talking about getting rid of at least some kind of positive movement in your locker room and on the field, and you're talking about getting rid of them, you take a step back in my opinion.
It's 100% rebuild mode. There's no way around it. I mean, Ryan Tannehill was the best part of the Dolphins team, and I think that's why they're down at the bottom, because they got a new coach, new philosophy. They're going to need a new quarterback. They're going to need some offensive linemen. They're going to need some wide receivers. They're going to need a running back. They're going to need defensive players. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. I don't know. We debated Cardinals below them. Who's our number 31 pick here? Spoiler alert. But honestly, I just couldn't do it. Not with all of these needs. At least when I look at the Cardinals, they have guys like Chandler Jones, who's an outstanding pass rusher. They have Patrick Peterson, who's still a great cornerback that has something left to give the league, even though he's maybe not quite as elite as he used to be, or he's getting to that point where he's going to start declining. They've got a couple weapons. They've got the quarterback in Rosen, so at least they don't have to go spend a draft pick on him. Drew, what is your biggest reason that the Cardinals are ahead of the Dolphins on your list?
What's going on, Andrew, man? We went from worst to top, so you're going to have to just hold out with us
well,
just
he's
for
a Patriot
little bit
fan.
longer.
I think he was calling out that the Patriots are number 1 in his book. Do we have him there? I don't know. Let's find out later.
What do you think? The reason why I have the Cardinals above the Dolphins is exactly what you just said. They have their staple point at quarterback. They have Josh Rosen. You know, as much as we dogged him all year long saying he can't do it, he's literally failing every time we look at him on the field, which he did. They never sat him. He didn't get hurt. He came out there every week and played like a quarterback should.
What's going on, Thomas? Good to see you out there in Columbus, man. I'm also a fellow Ohioan myself. I'm from the Cleveland area originally. Good to
Browns,
see you.
Huh?
Are you a Browns fan or are you a Bengals fan? Who do you root for out there out in Columbus, man? Great question. Good news is neither of those teams are at the bottom of the list. I hope you're not a Cardinals fan, but neither of your teams have been announced at number 1 or number 32 or 31. So going on to 30, we do have a team from Ohio, the Cincinnati Bengals. And I think this is fair. Even if you're a Bengals fan, man, it's tough love, but you got to look at this team and sit there and say they're not ready to compete. They have tons of defensive questions. Andy Dalton is still their starting quarterback, so that's – would you call that a plus, Drew?
I mean, mediocre.
Yeah, so it's not even a plus. It's not a plus. It's not a minus. It's nothing. You have a quarterback. You don't at least have to go spend on him. Ooh, who day? Sorry to break it to you, man. You guys are sitting at 30. A.J. Green's still on the team. That's fantastic. He's still a great playmaker when he's out there, but he's starting to rack up injuries. He's not the same player he was a couple of years ago. He's not putting the massive numbers up on the board simply because of injury. He hasn't been on the field enough to do it. Do you think a guy like Boyd will step up into that role going forward? Because he had a pretty decent season, especially with A.J. Green on the field. Is there an heir apparent already on this team, or do they need a new receiver?
He won't be A.J. Green-esque. He won't be that type of caliber player where he's considered, top 5 receiver in the NFL year in and year out. He might have 1 year where his numbers might reach that, because if he is the only one out there, no doubt about it, Andy Dalton is a red rocket. That guy can air the ball out, and when you are the number 1 guy, as he's shown with A.J. Green, he will target you out consistently over and over again. But I don't see him being the same kind of player. I think the best thing the Bengals have going for him right now is Joe Mixon. That defense is atrocious. Their linebacking core needs to be completely rehauled. Their defensive line is aging. They got a lot of people leaving in free agency, and some people that probably should go because they're not doing that well for you. There's a lot of things that you need to fix on this defensive side. At least some of those key points on the offensive side, which a quarterback, which Andy Dalton will get healthy. He did bring you to the playoffs. He couldn't win a big game. But it's nice to have someone with that kind of history and talent back there. And then you got a running back and some wide receivers kind of showing themselves out. Tight end, another big issue. That's why we have him sitting there at number 30.
Yeah, and you are right, Thomas. Mixon is a big part of this team. It's important that he is on this team going forward, but we've seen guys like Fournette flash for a year and then kind of go away. Mixon wasn't really great his first year. Then he got to be the dominant ball carrier this year. Took off, had a great year, but he's got to sustain it. And you've got questions on the offensive line. I mean, they just spent a high pick on a center, Billy Price, I believe is his name, and he's one of the worst graded centers in the NFL. Their offensive line is nothing special, even though they've kind of invested on it. They've got some questions. They need some better performances out of the guys they already have, and they're going to need to draft well if they're going to be competitive, especially when you look at the rest of the AFC North. They're all starting to trend upward, and the Bengals are kind of stagnating down at the bottom.
Yep. At number 29, we got the Detroit Lions. And there's only one guy, the reason he's not sitting lower than that, and that's Matthew Stafford, their franchise quarterback.
Well, they do have Darius Slay. I like Darius Slay as a cornerback. He's one of the least talked about cornerbacks that can really take a guy out of the game. He's pretty much a lockdown corner, or as close as you get to it. The problem is the second corner, they haven't been able to figure out who that's going to be for years now. They've been absolutely atrocious against the pass. They've been weak against the run. They've got a lot of questions on defense. They brought in Matt Patricia, and we saw kind of a little bit of a spark, a little bit in some games where things were starting to look a little bit better, but it just hasn't quite got there yet. They need to add a bunch of pieces still to the defense. They need new playmakers now with Golden Tate leaving on the offensive side of the ball. They just need to refresh the team.
What's going on, Ryan? And they definitely need a pass rusher. Ziggy Ansah couldn't stay healthy or didn't even look like himself. They franchise tag him over and over again. This guy's obviously has lost it or doesn't want to play there. It's time to move on from him. That's a huge piece that they're missing. Yes, I like Darius Slay. Yes, I consider him one of the better corners in the NFL, but it doesn't matter how good you are. If you don't have a pass rush, you're going to get burnt up too every now and then.
Absolutely, and it remains to be seen if they're bringing him back. All likelihood looks towards no. They're probably going to let him go. But it's a defensive draft. The Lions have a first-round pick. Maybe we see them go edge rusher. I wouldn't be surprised if they do.
They should. At number 28, we got the Jaguars. And how would you not have them there? Look at the cap space issue, quarterback issue, running back issue, because they don't even know if they're keeping Fournette. Fournette's been considered on the chopping block. Where do you see him?
They said the same thing about Jalen Ramsey. They said the same thing about Leonard Fournette. I mean, getting rid of these young, cheap, talented guys that are maybe not top 10 with Fournette, maybe top 10, right around that area, and you're just going to go trade him? For what? Who's going to give you a pick? They're going to get like a third or a fourth round pick for a top 10 running back in the league right now who's young and cheap. And then Jalen Ramsey, the fact that he's even being considered, you just need to have a sit down with him and be like, look, stop insulting every cornerback in the NFL every week, okay? And then things go back to fine. The problem with the Jags is they've overspent. Man. Too many off seasons. They've just sat there, open the wallet. They've tried to win free agency. They've tried to bring in the biggest signings every year. And we saw that kind of work for 1 year where they made the AFC Championship. The problem is, now the chickens have come home to roost, and they have all these big contracts. Things aren't going well. They're, like you said, $30 million over the cap. No quarterback, as Blake Bortles is terrible, even though I expect him to get cut. They got a lot of issues. They got a lot of things to figure out before next year, or we're going to be looking at another 3 to 4 win team.
And as you Jaguar fans out there, your team is obviously not they know this is going on. That's the reason why Dante Fowler Jr. went ahead and got traded off to the Rams. They are already starting to move those pieces and open up that cap for you to help you bring in some of these, like a veteran quarterback, hopefully, for next year.
And it's what keeps football exciting because your window can open and close at any moment. But I'm sure Jaguar fans were hoping when they made that AFC Championship that they'd have at least one more shot.
It was rough.
But Andrew Luck's back. Daddy's home in the AFC South. So maybe that window has already closed. I hope we don't have to wait Andrew Luck out for the rest of his career. But Jacksonville's got a lot to do if they're going to be able to compete with the Colts next year.
Absolutely. At number 27, we have the Denver Broncos.
I think they're higher than this. And you criticized me in the offseason. You criticized me during the regular season for being on the Broncos.
And I was absolutely right every time I
Come
brought
on, Drew.
it up,
They won,
man.
what, 6 games? They're not that bad.
No, they are. And they just got that much worse because they just changed offense. Or they just changed their head coach. And they didn't go where it needed to go, and they needed to help their offense. They went in a defensive-minded coach. So their plan was to keep Kubiak there and make him their offense coordinator. He said he didn't want to take the job and moved on. In my opinion, even though they're not outcrying to the public and telling it was definitely a flop, I think this is a huge flop. Vic, their Fangio, I think is going to be a great quarterback, a great head coach. He's going to help that defense, even though that defense doesn't need a lot of help. But the struggles are all on the offensive side of the ball. Where is he going to get that help from?
They need a second corner as well. I mean, Roby never worked out as well as they were hoping. 2 years ago when he was their nickel corner, they were like, this guy's going to ascend. We don't need to keep Talib because this guy's ready to go. He's ready to take the reins. Now they're talking about letting him walk. I mean, honestly, he was not very good this year. They need that second corner to play across from Chris Harris. They need a quarterback, like you said, because Case Keenum obviously isn't the guy. Offensive line also can use work. You hear me say that a lot tonight, especially in the bottom of this list. And then they need weapons. They need wide receivers that can impact the game. They just drafted Cortland Sutton, but he was not exactly a game breaker, especially when Emmanuel Sanders went out at the end of the year. They dried up at wide receiver. I mean, there was nobody sitting there helping them out.
No, you're absolutely right. And you got to remember, Emmanuel Sanders went down hurt. He's 30, 31 years old, coming back from an injury. Who knows where he's going to be? Don't get me wrong. This guy healthy, he's absolute stud. But until that,
time's running out.
They got to figure out what's going on there. Yeah, they got a great running back core, but that obviously showed a little decline later in the year because I actually threw up Philip Lindsay as one of my kind of sneak rookie of the year contenders, and he just fell off after I said that, so I was completely wrong.
Yeah, I mean, there was a little bit of injury that came into play and everything, but he looked close to Saquon Barkley in production when you look at the actual numbers. Out of a 6th or 7th or an undrafted guy, I can't remember which round he went in. And Barkley was, the second overall pick. So when you hit on running back like that and you get that guy, it's great for the team because you're going to get 4 really cheap years. So I like Philip Lindsay. I like their running game going forward. Their offensive line is still a bit of a question mark, but they're not as bad as some of these other teams down here. The Broncos, like I said, I think they're a little bit higher than this, but it's your decision, Drew. I mean, you kind of talked me into putting them here. But this next one hurts me.
Okay, let's just clarify here. You only wanted to move them up one more spot. And the reason is because I put at number 26 the Oakland Raiders. And I know everyone's going, what? These guys were one of the worst team. If it wasn't for the Cardinals, they were the worst team. But I'm going to go ahead and out there and say, don't sleep on John Gruden just yet and what his plan is, because he got rid of key pieces in that offense and that defense, but they weren't winning any championships with these guys either. So that's one thing we got to remember.
I don't know, Drew. 2 years ago, they looked like an up-and-comer.
Did they make it?
No.
Okay, so they move those pieces on, bring in draft picks, get Gruden's guys in there. They're stuck with this guy for 10 years. No, it's 9 now. So they got to figure out how to make it work.
And I think Oakland fans are flipping the number over on the board, only down to 9.
They got a great draft in front of them. It's a heavily defensive, talented draft. They need all those players they could possibly get in the defense side of the ball. They had 3 in the first round. They got to hit at least 2 of those 3. I believe in it in the sense they're going to get great players. Do I see them going above 20 or into the top 10? No. But I just think they're on the right path, which the Broncos have taken a step back, in my opinion.
And the rebuild is on right now. I mean, like you said, this is the defensive draft. Maybe they sit there and hit on 3 of these defensive players early, and we're talking about how Oakland has one of the stingiest defenses in a year or two when these guys have some time to develop. I don't know, Drew. I look at this. I think they're going to draft a wide receiver to replace Amari Cooper. You'll see them take an edge guy, maybe a defensive tackle as well. And maybe they're on the fast track to rebuilding. They have Derek Carr, like you said. He hasn't been moved on yet, even though apparently Gruden doesn't like him too much. They don't really gel very well. But you're stuck with him. You've paid him. And he's got a little bit of talent. So maybe you can kind of mend some fences and say, hey, we may not.
Talent?
He's a talented guy. I like Derek Carr. Believe me, I'd love him here.
I don't know if I'd call it a little bit of talent.
Okay, well.
He's a talented.
He's not Tom Brady, but he's a talented guy. I'll give you that. I don't know, Drew. I look at this Raiders team, and I still put them behind the Broncos. 3 picks or not, I'd put them behind the Broncos, but that's okay. I think they're close. And I think these 2 teams are going to be at the bottom of the AFC West next year, battling for 3rd and 4th place. But I'm not sure, man. I don't know. The Chargers might be down there with him.
At number 25, we have the New York Jets. I tell you the reason I got them this low is because it seems like every year they could just have they got right to that corner to turn it. They're just about to turn that corner, and they make a mistake. They hire someone like Todd Bowles, who seems to can't keep the locker room together and lost a lot of talent on the defensive side of the ball. Couldn't figure out if Josh McCown was your quarterback or if Ryan Fitzpatrick was your quarterback. You couldn't figure it out. So now you got your quarterback. Now you got a new head coach. Maybe this is your turning point where you're about to go around that corner and make this team better.
And maybe one of these days they'll stop shooting themselves in the foot and letting a lot of guys walk that have talent.
That's
like
what
Mo
I'm talking
Wilkinson
about. Yep.
and Sheldon Richardson and everything like that. They need to hang on to some of their stars because the next guy up is Jamal Adams. I mean, he's an absolutely fantastic safety for you guys. They need to keep him. They need to build around him, but they need to keep him on track. You can't let anyone run the locker room. And you're right. I mean, I do think that was a big issue with Todd Bowles is they had a lot of attitudes in the locker room. There's a lot of stuff like Robbie Anderson saying, "I need to be the highest paid wide receiver in football" and everything.
Why?
Yeah, exactly. So they need to keep everybody on track. They need to keep everything calm, focused, and then they need Darnold to grow a little bit. To do that, you got to bring in weapons. You got to bring guys that can help him out, make catches when he makes mistakes, make things happen when he makes mistakes.
Yep.
Right now, they don't have that guy. And they just paid Quincy Enunwa like he was that guy. That was a mistake in my opinion, but moving forward, they need to add more pieces around there. That's the long and the short of it. They need offensive playmakers.
Just real quick, it's a little overpriced for that kind of quality of player, but if you can keep him there and you can put better pieces around him, I think it was a good move because you're right, people don't want to be there. So they're going to move on. So you have problems signing Mo, and you have problems signing
Richardson. Yeah,
Richardson. You have problems signing those players because they don't want to be there. That's why it needs to be a change of this locker room. And if that happens with Adam Gase there, which is a possibility, I like Adam Gase. I think this is a great hire. It's just, can he turn that locker room around to his favor because it seems like Todd Bowles could not.
And I think Adam Gase has also got the most out of Ryan Tannehill. Like, you probably saw Ryan Tannehill at his absolute best down there in Miami, where he didn't really have that great of weapons. He didn't really have that great of a running game. But you still were winning games. And even though it was ugly, you were winning games. Ryan Tannehill was making some good throws, making throws in the clutch, and that's the difference between winning and losing. If he can do that with Sam Darnold, and maybe they actually add some receivers that can make an impact, we'll be talking about how the Jets have rebounded under Gase.
Right.
I don't necessarily think it's going to happen, but they're in better position than some of these other teams to make it happen.
Absolutely. At number 24, we have Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I just want to start with saying I love this hire head coach, Bruce Arians. I like what they're going to try to do here. Focus on that defense. Question is, what are they going to do with that offense?
That's a great question. I mean, they were already number 3 in the passing game. They had no running game basically whatsoever with Peyton Barber. Their offensive line is atrocious. They were taking all kinds of hits and everything at quarterback. They need to figure out how to solve those problems. And then they went and hired a different offensive guy. I mean, I don't have a problem with them leaning on that, but why get rid of Dirk Koetter if that's the case? I mean, he pretty much, like I was talking about with Gase, you saw the best Jameis Winston with him this year. Yeah. I mean, you saw the best in his system that you've seen all his entire NFL career. With Dirk Koetter, you fire him and bring another offensive guy on? I really don't get that. If they would have brought a defensive guy on and said, we can pass the ball, we can move it like that, we need to play a little bit of defense, and maybe we're dangerous, I'd understand it. But And I like their head coach, Bruce Arians. I like Bruce Arians a lot, but I'm not crazy about that hire. If I'm Tampa Bay, just hang on to Dirk Koetter and sign a good defensive coordinator and work on this defense. Spend a couple picks on the defense for once.
I think it was too many one more chances for him. And they were talking about giving him last year, and they didn't do it. They gave him one more year. They gave him one more chance. And it was still the same outcome. Now, do I blame it on him? Not at all. I mean, he has 2 quarterbacks that seem like they can never stop turning the ball over. Finally, Winston at the very end kind of showed a little bit better than that. But really, they were suffering all year long with turnovers, and their defense couldn't stop anybody. So now you're bringing in a head coach that's huge on that defensive side of the ball. That's where he flourishes at. Why not bring a guy in there? Bring in someone like that, and then you could bring in an offensive coordinator to help. Bring in someone, I can't remember who they brought in. I did know, and I don't remember now. That can help Winston, because you're not going to get rid of him. You're going to keep him there. You can't draft anyone right now, which is which is terrible. But wait until one more year, get some of these other big name quarterbacks coming out of the college, and then move on from him if he doesn't work out. I think this is the best hire at the right situation. I think next year would be 1 year too late.
I guess we'll see. But moving on, why don't we talk about a surprise pick, a little bit lower on the list, and I think a lot of people would think of Carolina, man, at number 23. What's your reasoning behind it?
Well, what Cam Newton do we get? Is he going to even be there? At this point in time, while we did this power ranking, we had to assume he's not going to be there. This guy has a bum shoulder. He's obviously a lot more hurt than he went off to begin with. He said he could have played the rest of the season if they were in playoff contentions, but they weren't, so he decided to sit the rest of them. Well, he was forced by the owner to do it. Man, it's tough. So when you look at
if
that,
you're talking about, well, you look at what the team looked like when they actually sat him down. The last couple weeks, it was absolutely atrocious. They have no backup. They have no heir apparent. They have nobody who can step in to play quarterback right now. If Cam Newton is sat down for a year, like they're talking about, might be an issue. He might have the same kind of shoulder surgery that Andrew Luck had.
Yeah.
We're talking about Carolina being absolutely terrible. Their defense is good, but only in spurts. Their defense was not dominant by any stretch of the mind. They were good in games. They were really bad in games. Remember the Pittsburgh game where they absolutely got annihilated by Pittsburgh's like meandering offense at that point in the season? I mean, they don't have an elite unit. They've got a couple guys that are good. They have guys like Luke Kuechly that's great. Bunch of other guys as well.
Well, he can't stay healthy.
But even beyond all of that, it's like the unit as a whole is not that stout anymore. This isn't the defense that took you to the Super Bowl anymore.
Right, because everywhere that you have your talented players, they're aging.
Exactly.
They're older. They're not being able to stay healthy. You got Davis, who's probably...
He's gone, they said. They're going to let him go. He's going to try to play again.
I was going to say, I think they're letting him go. You got Luke Kuechly, who can't stay healthy, at least for all 16 games. Your defensive line with Starr and other players like that, they're all aging. They're all looking for bigger contracts, too. I think Starr's a free agent. So, I mean, it's...
You didn't want to say Latulele.
No, I will pass on that one. So it's going to be a struggle for this team, especially without Cam Newton. Bees, what's going on, man?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Panthers are in real trouble without Cam Newton. And as much as we've kind of bagged on Cam Newton as a whole, they have no other plan. They have no backup plan at all. It's not like the days past where they've had Derek Anderson, who's come in and won them a couple games. And I wouldn't want to play with Derek Anderson for an entire season either. But you don't necessarily have any kind of backup plan. You don't have a rookie quarterback. You don't have a guy who can step in, like even a Blaine Gabbert that you're like, maybe this guy wins, like when he was out in Arizona and San Fran. They don't have anyone near talented enough to play the spot. So do you draft a quarterback here? Do you try to sign somebody like a Joe Flacco to get you through for a year? I don't know. They're in trouble. That's why they're so low on this list, because of their quarterback situation. They are in trouble next year.
They're not signing no veteran quarterback. I guarantee that's not going to happen. I actually will see them drafting a quarterback just because it's time. It's not that Cam Newton's old. It's not that you move on from Cam Newton. It's you need to put pressure behind this guy because, yeah, you took us to a Super Bowl, but you didn't win it. Yeah, you're talented, but now you're not staying healthy. Now you're not getting my team over the hump. Do you need a little push out there to make you do a little bit better? I mean, no one wants to hear that about Cam Newton. That's their franchise quarterback. But it's just the truth. If that guy isn't performing, which he is not at this point, he needs a push in the right direction.
Not to mention he relies on his physicality. I mean, the reason Cam Newton's as good as he is isn't because he's a pinpoint accurate thrower. Right. It's not because he has necessarily any kind of point of his game that's all about technique. It's because he's big, he's physical, he's strong, he runs it himself, and when he throws the ball, he can throw it an absolutely long way. So you look at that goes with age. He's getting to the point now where you're going to start to see a little bit of that decline coming in. The question is, how long is he going to stick around, and how long is he going to be able to keep this level of production on the field? Because if he keeps taking another injury or two, that might be it for his career.
Yep. Well, let's go on to our next one. At number 22, we kind of have the same situation, the Washington Redskins. Now, I actually think they're in a better situation just because their defense isn't that old. Their defense didn't have issues staying healthy. This defense stayed really stout for a long time. Their issue was at quarterback, Alex Smith. Sounds like he's done. So what are they?
At least for another year, from what I understand.
Well, they might just move on without him because they can't wait this long. What do you think they're going to do?
They're going to draft somebody. They're going to try to trade up. The question is, at 15, I think they have in the NFL draft this year, are they going to be able to move up to get ahead of teams like Jacksonville, the Giants, the Dolphins, teams that also want to draft quarterbacks? And that's the biggest question. I mean, they may just decide we're not going to have the capital to move up and get ahead of these guys. Why don't we just go sign somebody again? I think they're going to stay away from that. They're going to give the farm up. They're going to trade up and get either Kyler Murray or Dwayne Haskins if they can get a hold of him. And they're just going to sit there and hope that these other teams don't outbid them for it. They've already went through that same song and dance where they're like, we'll bring in Alex Smith and things will be fine. He's a veteran quarterback.
Now, I just want to remind you, this is the same Redskins team owner that also traded up and moved up to get Robert Griffin III.
And he's given up a lot, but maybe, just maybe, Dan Snyder can learn from his mistakes.
Is that kind of like caution tape when he's looking moving up?
It is, but what else do you do, Drew? I mean, if you're them, are you going to sign Nick Foles?
What about a Joe Flacco?
I
What
can see
about
Joe
an Eli
Flacco,
Manning?
But they just went through that with Alex Smith. That was the same story going into last year, where they're like, we'll just bring in the veteran.
Is
and this team
it
will
cheaper
be fine.
to pay a veteran quarterback $20 million or whatever they're asking for 1 or 2 years, or is it cheaper for them to give up 1-2 first round picks to move up to a quarterback that they don't know what they're getting, regardless of what it is?
Not to mention you can close your own window.
I think it's cheaper to go ahead and get a veteran, and if one of those quarterbacks fall to them, that's great. But if you move up again, you're putting yourself in the back in the same situation you did for RG3.
Now, I agree with you. It is a risk. But what happens if this guy pans out? What if you get a Carson Wentz? What if you get a Jared Goff?
Carson Wentz can't
What if you get an Andrew Luck? I mean, honestly,
you're
they just
right,
got the wrong guy out of that draft.
I mean, you're right.
So it's definitely the riskier play to move up in the draft and try to go with a young guy, but you're also buying a longer career more than likely.
Right.
Whereas when you sign Joe Flacco, when you sign Nick Foles, you'll have him for another 3, 4, 5 years. They're both about 31, 32 years old. I think Flacco's 33 or 34, but you're going to get, maybe 3, 4, 5 years of elite production, and then maybe a little bit after that, unless they're Tom Brady or Drew Brees and they can hang on to 40, but not everybody does that.
Right.
I don't know. It's a risk both directions because the window's
is.
open now. If you sign one of these guys and you get Alex Smith again, where he gets hurt and then your season goes to hell, how many seasons are you going to have an elite defense? How many seasons are you going to have a running game this stout or offensive players that are this good? On the offensive line, I get it. They still need receivers and everything, but there's risk to that too. Not doing anything is also a risk.
Their defense is young. Luckily, a lot of majority pieces, maybe minus Josh Norman, are all pretty young.
But it's not always age. Sometimes they're sitting there like, I can go get paid.
Running back, more than likely, Adrian Peterson's not going to be there, but they're going to get guys
They're
back
talking about re-signing him. They are, yeah.
It's just...
that came out, I think it was yesterday, that they're talking about re-signing AP as well.
But I like Geis. I like him. Even though he got hurt, I think he's going to do pretty well. So we'll see what happens. It's definitely an issue, but that's why we have him at 22, because they don't have the main piece of their offense.
Absolutely. Who do we have ahead of them that might be a little controversial?
At number 21, this is actually, I think, your call.
It is.
And this is the Buffalo Bills at number 21.
And I like Buffalo's defense. That's the reason they're this high. I get it. They lost Kyle Williams this year. He's a huge part of their defense, huge run stuffer in the middle of that defensive line. But guess what's coming up in this draft? A lot of good defensive tackles, defensive talent, especially on the defensive line. So I think the Buffalo Bills are sitting in one of the best positions where they already have a set defense. They already have a quarterback who looks like he knows what he's doing in Josh Allen. They just need to add offensive weapons. Now, it's not the best draft for a receiver, but some of these guys might evolve into a number 1 receiver. They might be a number 2 guy. Buffalo's going to spend on some wide receivers this offseason. I think they'll sign a free agent. I think they'll try to draft somebody as well, at least 1, maybe 2. And then we're going to be talking about a refreshed Buffalo Bills offense as well. Going with this defense, it's already stout. This team has a lot to look forward to. I think Buffalo might actually be good. And I was down on Josh Allen early. I had him going like number 3 in the draft because I was like, Cleveland's going to make a mistake and draft him. Or 4, I think it was last year. But I was down on him before. I like him better now, having watched a season of his play. He's a guy that just gets things done.
The only reason that when I look at this team and I can't put him, top half of the league is Josh Allen. And this is kind of weird. We're reversing roles because you usually talk down about him and I usually talk him up. And I'm actually going to talk him down because he cannot stay healthy if he keeps doing what he did this year. He obviously proved he can't stay healthy because he got hurt. Yeah, this guy's a playmaker talent. There's no doubt about it. This guy can make plays. He can do everything on his feet. He has an arm on him. He has a little bit of accuracy issue. Hopefully they can clean that up. One of the hardest things to do in the NFL. This guy can do it, but you got to get weapons around him. And they thought they had him around him with McCoy, who got hurt, who was aging, and then I think got hurt as well. Then you had Benjamin, but you had to let him go. You had Zay Jones, who they drafted.
And you're right. Go ahead.
Who didn't really get to do that well. And then you had that one
Robert Foster.
Who came out, who did really well with them. But the thing is that enough? Is that enough to get this young quarterback, get rid of him wanting to run the ball because that's all he can do, and actually start throwing it like a quarterback should?
And no, I don't think it is, but their offensive line isn't terrible. I think they need a new left tackle. They may draft one, especially Jonah Williams. I think that's a pretty good fit out of Alabama with their first overall pick. But they already have a lot of this team figured out. Their offensive line's pretty good. They already have the defense figured out, like as a unit. They're pretty good on that side of the ball, just as a group. So they don't, they could use an extra cornerback. They could use maybe an extra defensive tackle now. But even if you go with what they have, they've already got that figured out. That's what a lot of these teams behind them don't have figured out entirely, is an entire side of the ball just figured out. You have Josh Allen. You don't need to pick that up. You don't need too many offensive linemen. You could use a running back, but they're a dime a dozen. You can go draft somebody in the 5th round or leave somebody undrafted like Phillip Lindsay, and all of a sudden we're talking about how that's not a need anymore. So you need to add a couple receivers realistically to Buffalo. Right. A couple receivers, and we're talking about this team could be dangerous. Do I think they're beating the Patriots? Maybe not, but I think they're probably at least a lot closer than they have been for a while.
At number 20, we got the New York Giants.
And this team is really one of the biggest question marks for me, because if they have a great offseason, we're going to be talking about them being a threat. If they don't, we're going to be talking about how they don't matter at all, and how everyone's just talking about the Giants, how they have all this talent like Odell Beckham and Saquon Barkley, but they don't live up to expectations. Drew, what's the biggest part of this team that they need to work on if they're going to get there?
Defensive line, quarterback. And not
in that order?
Yeah. I actually
Really?
think it's that order, too, because if they're going to keep Eli there, which they're talking about it, then yes, they need to go to defensive line first. They need to get after the quarterback. That defense has talent on it, but they need to be able to create pressure where their secondary can create turnovers. If Eli moves on, then obviously it's quarterback first. But let's hold off one more year. Let some of these younger quarterbacks coming out of college that look like true pros in the NFL, kind of like what we had come out, what was it, last year or 2 years ago, where they had about 3 of them that looked really good. I think that's what they should wait for. Eli has gotten to 2 Super Bowls, won 2 Super Bowls with him. As much as he looks like trash and he looks like everything's his fault, man, that offensive line didn't hold anything for him. Those weapons weren't getting open. Odell Beckham Jr. was not being open every time. The only bright, shiny side of the offense was Barkley. But you can't run him into the ground, or he's useless if you took him at number 2.
Exactly. I mean, I agree with you on that. But one thing I will say is you have to go quarterback in this draft, because this team has enough talent on it that you may wind up finishing around that 13, 14, 15 number next year. And when that happens, you're not going to be able to trade up to get those guys.
That's
There's going to be
when you
teams
trade
ahead
the
of you that
farm.
are going to go get them.
That's when you trade the farm.
Weren't you just telling Dan Snyder and the Redskins not to do that?
Well, they just did it. The Giants haven't done that this time.
Okay,
so
but
trade it
all I'm saying is you can't sit there and say, well, we'll just be bad next year, because you don't. You have enough talent in this team that you may stumble into 6, 7, 8 wins, and when you do that, you're killing your chances to get a quarterback. You're already at the top of the draft this year. You have the first pick ahead of everybody else right now that still needs one. I'd be shocked if they don't go quarterback here. They're probably going to go try to get Dwayne Haskins, but it might be somebody else.
We're doing power rankings, Bees. Right now we're number 20. We're just going from bottom all the way to top. If draft talk comes up, then we'll talk about it.
We are going to talk about the draft, because this is an important part of our decision with where these teams are, is how well are they going to be able to draft? What are they going to be able to do? How many free agents are they going to bring in? Again, a lot of this power ranking goes into not necessarily where this team finished the year, but going forward into 2019, what's our confidence in these guys?
Cap space, trade rumors, free agency, draft, all this is put in here. So if that stuff comes up, we'll definitely talk about it. Of course, all your guys' questions, anything you have as far as what you've heard or what you're wondering, we'll gladly answer that stuff as well.
Absolutely, and feel free to give your opinion about your team. If you think the Giants are higher than us, if you think they're lower than where we have them, you let us know.
At number 19, we have the Green Bay Packers. Talk about a controversial pick right there.
For one guy, Aaron Rodgers.
Aaron Rodgers.
The reason, I mean, they're paying this dude $35 million or something along those lines to be their quarterback, and there's a reason the rest of this team stinks. It's because he's eating up all the cap space. Now, I can't fault him. He's a great guy. I can't sit there and say I wouldn't do it in his position where I'm like, I'm that good. Time to go get paid. But it's hurting the team. It really is. I mean, there's a reason the rest of this team stinks so bad is because they can't afford to pay anyone else, and they haven't tried to pay anyone else as an organization up till now.
Yeah, they have one of those huge beliefs that you build up through the draft, and that's how you're going to do it. Well, it hasn't really worked lately too much for them. They're going to need to start looking at this free agency and start moving some of these players in, because not everything is going to be able to come through the draft. They have way too many holes, and they're letting a lot of players go. I get the reason for moving on from HaHa Clinton Dix, but I don't think that was the right move, because he's still above average player in the NFL, and you need help, not lose help.
Exactly, and who knows, they may have their chance to re-sign him here in the offseason, because he isn't going to be a free agent. I don't think he goes back to Green Bay. There might be some hurt feelings there being traded in the middle of the year, but you never know.
Never know.
On top of that, you're right, Drew. They need pretty much every facet of the defensive side of the ball. They need D tackles. They need D ends. They need linebackers that can be impactful and make impact plays, move across the field. They need safeties. They need cornerbacks. They need just about everything. I mean, I like Josh Johnson that they drafted last year, but they still need help on that. They need just about everything under the sun, and yet they're still dangerous. Why do we say that? Because they have Aaron Rodgers. If he can stay healthy, which is becoming more of a question mark in his career, But if he stays healthy, this team is kind of like the Colts, where they can go from being absolutely terrible to beating any team any week because of this one guy on the roster.
And, you really can't put it on him as far as being healthy or not. How much pounding can you give one guy who's trying to do everything he possibly can to get your team a win and expect him to stay healthy when all he's doing is constantly putting himself out there to get hurt? It's time to do something, but until they do, they are below 500 in my opinion, sitting at number 19. And number 18, we have the Minnesota Vikings.
This is tough. When you look at this roster, I'm like, how are they this low in our power rankings? But then again, the way they played this year, the way Kirk Cousins looked, everything else, I'm like, they're not beating some of these teams ahead of them. I mean, they're really not. I look at the Vikings. They have all the talent in the world. They have Adam Thielen. They have Stephon Diggs. Both of those guys are great. They have Dalvin Cook, who can be great maybe if they try running the ball a couple times. They need an offensive line.
As soon as he got healthy, he definitely exploded, but they didn't run him. They didn't run with him.
Even before that, when they had Latavius Murray, they weren't running. They were running the ball barely. They barely weren't running it, and they were going with Kirk Cousins throwing the ball all over the lot, and that's why they fired their offensive coordinator by week 15.
To be honest, I think they should have fired their defensive coordinator too. You're talking about tons of talent on that defensive side of the ball that seem to struggle on stopping people. I mean, it's hard when you look at NFL teams to find 1, 2, and 3 corners that could start in the NFL all on one team, and they had that.
Now, Bees disagrees with us. He says he thinks the Vikings are better. Now, on paper, Bees, I agree with you, man, but they're not going to have a ton of cap space, especially paying $27.5 million to Kirk Cousins guaranteed. So they're not going to improve too much. They've got guys like Sheldon Richardson that are probably going to leave in free agency as well. The defense is getting to the point now where Anthony Barr is also up on contract. They're getting to the point now where this defense might start falling apart, and you don't have the money to keep these guys, and you don't really have that high of a draft pick to go after somebody that's going to instantly replace them. So I think the Vikings have some questions going forward. If they're going to make a playoff push, if they're going to make a Super Bowl push, they're going to have to overpower the Bears this year, and they're going to have to do it this year. Because next year, I think it's going to get even worse.
And don't sleep on that Barr and Richardson being free agents. If they let those guys go, that's a huge knock in your guys' defense. Because that defense is so good, they rely on that rotation to get rid of those players, especially someone like Barr, who's an every down back, who's a great cover back.
And it's funny, you say that great defense, and they were 2 years ago. They were absolutely fantastic. Well, they only added pieces, and they got worse. I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
They're great talent-wise. How about that?
Exactly.
Because they weren't great number-wise.
I know Kirk Cousins and the offense wasn't doing them any favors. They were probably playing more snaps because they were trying to throw the ball. They weren't on the field as long on the offensive side of the ball.
Why they got rid of the coordinator.
But, I mean, you can't sit there and tell me that the Vikings are in great shape, especially going into this offseason when they have money troubles, and they're not going to be able to bring on a whole lot of new talent. So unless they have the same personnel and do a total coin flip like they did last year and they're back to being instantly great, I think you have to put them this low in the power rankings.
At number 17, we have San Francisco 49ers. Now, this is kind of a my pick because I fully believe still in Jimmy G, and they're also going to get Jerick McKinnon back. And I also believe with all this cap space that they have, they're going to make some moves during this offseason. Is it Antonio Brown? Maybe. If not, it's going to be after wide receivers. It's going to be after offensive weapons because that defense, even though it still needs a little bit of help, they're still a good defense. The problem is they were constantly on the field, kind of like Minnesota was, where they had to be out there consistently over and over. This team has tons of space to only improve. Do I see them improving this next year? It might not be. It might be a 2-year improvement picture, but when you have Jimmy G and you have Kyle Shanahan running that offense, this is a scary team.
And you just hit the nail on the head with that. Their greatest asset is the head coach, and we don't talk about that very often, but their greatest asset is the scheme they run. How many teams could lose their starting quarterback and compete with teams like the Chargers and others that are good teams on a week in and week out basis? There was no time, well, I shouldn't say no time, but for the most part, the 49ers stayed in games with a guy like Nick Mullins, who was on the street before the season started, with C.J. Beathard, who's not any kind of NFL talent. You're talking about they're getting their starting quarterback back. They have cap space to bring in weapons. They have another draft now to kind of shore up this defensive line. They already have a lot of talent on it, but they're probably going to go get an edge rusher or maybe another D tackle instead. And then they're going to bring in a couple cornerbacks, and I think this team is going to be a lot more competitive this year. The question is, can Jimmy G stay healthy, and are we going to get a full season of this kid?
Oh, I believe so. I mean, when you look at his injury, it was more of him just being not smart with his decision-making. It was not because he was in the pocket and got hurt. This was just him trying to make a football move, and he didn't make it. B says, I think if the Niners get Bell, they'll be a top team next year. I'm I'm right there with you, man.
If Jimmy G stays healthy.
But
I think
that's
all
what I'm
that goes
telling
out
you.
the window if you lose him.
When
And
you
then
have that
they'll
much
still win
cap
6
space-
games. I mean, they'll still win 6 games without him. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that much cap space. You can bring in someone like Bell. You can even bring in Brown, too. It's there.
it'd be a great move. I think they'd be paying a lot of money to running backs at that point because they just paid Jerick
Hey, you
McKinnon.
wanna win now
But
or
you
what?
never know. You never know. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying I don't think it's going to happen. I think Le'Veon Bell's going to want to go somewhere else. And if you're Jerick McKinnon and you think you finally get your chance, you get hurt in the preseason, then they go sign it to Le'Veon Bell to be in front of you. I mean, talk about a bad break.
It'd be rough.
I think the 49ers have some money. They need to spend it wisely. I don't think they've done that in the past. They've overpaid for guys like Pierre Garçon and Jerick McKinnon, in my opinion. If they can spend this money wisely, I think they're probably 2 years away from being a playoff team, where we're talking about them challenging the Rams in that NFC West. But you never know. They might be able to make the push in just one. Football turns around quick.
It does.
Let's talk 16, Drew.
All right, at number 16, we had the Cleveland Browns.
Really?
Yes. I could not put them in the bottom half of these rankings. They had to be the top half. Even if it's at number 16, they had to be there. And
It's a team on the rise.
I get it. Kitchens was not a great hire. It doesn't look like anything you wanted to do. It doesn't even look like it's even football. But I believe in the talent of this roster can overcome that. I think that's what they did when Williams took over coaching. I think it was more the talent than anything else. I think that these guys got together and said, we are more talented than our schedule, our record shows. And they're going to do it again. And I believe in Baker Mayfield. I think that guy is a true NFL quarterback, even through all the naysayers of his attitude and his height. Man, this guy's just proven he can play ball, and I think they deserve number 16.
You know, I was one of the naysayers as well. I wasn't high on Josh Allen. I wasn't high on Baker Mayfield either, but I've kind of come around a little bit. I like the swagger. I do. I mean, it takes a little bit of that attitude, a little bit of that, well, I'm not going to say that. It takes a little bit of a jerk if you want to win everything, and he certainly has that. They need a couple more weapons. I like Jarvis Landry, but they need to bring in a couple higher-level receivers, I think, if they're going to be truly dangerous. They have Njoku as well, who needs to take that next step forward.
Right.
And then on defense, they need to get some rotational guys. Myles Garrett played way too many snaps on the defensive line this year. Mm-hmm. If they're going to be an elite defense and one that can be, impactful throughout games, they need to bring in guys that can rotate. You can't keep one guy in the field the entire game and expect him to be a good pass rusher in the NFL. It just doesn't happen. But that's all fixable. This is the draft for defensive ends. And then when you talk about wide receiver talent, second-round picks, I think, are going to be a match made in heaven for the Cleveland Browns, bringing in their next wide receiver to play across from Jarvis Landry.
Sharif, we did. The Browns at number 16. What's going on, Matthew?
I know. You'd think it'd be 16 times 2. Usually we're talking about this in the back end of the list where the Browns are number 31, 32, 33 even behind the Crimson Tide. But, you talk about this Browns team, you have to give them credit. They look good this year. And they beat a lot of teams they shouldn't. They wound up tying Pittsburgh.
Bees is calling it right now.
They beat your Ravens, Sharif. I mean, you got to give them a little bit of credit,
right? Now they're winning the division next year.
No, they're not winning the division. I like you, Bees, and I value your opinion, but I think you're wrong on this one. I like this team. I think they're 2 years away from being truly dangerous. I don't think with Tony Kitchens coming in that you might see a bit of a culture shift. You're not going to have that hard-nosed Greg Williams-style team that it doesn't matter what they're talking about. We get this win. I think the Browns are going to take a step back in that regard, and I think they're going to be behind the Baltimore Ravens. I think they're going to finish second or third, depending on what Pittsburgh looks like.
Sharif, I was right there. When I started talking about them, it's the Kitchens hire is what really hurts this team. But I think it's the same kind of scenario when Greg Williams took over. This is too talented of a roster. Too much of these guys are going, we are too good for this record that we're holding right now. Let's go out and win some of these games. And I think it took some of that. Now, can Kitchens get any of that kind of magic out of them? I don't know. We don't know that yet. Let's hope maybe they can. But as much as I don't like that coaching hire, I believe in that roster.
Good to see you too, Matthew. Good to see you in here, man. Appreciate all of the activity in our community section there. We appreciate that, man. Going back to the Browns, I hate that they're only one spot behind my Titans. I really do.
Well, let's go on. Number 15, we got the Tennessee Titans.
I fought harder for this, guys. I did. I tried to move them up the list a little bit, but honestly, when you look at the teams ahead of them, I think the Titans are at 15. They need help on the defensive end position big time. They're losing probably Derek Morgan. They definitely lost Brian Arakpo to retirement this year, and they weren't effective last year. They have basically one guy in their front seven who's truly dominant, and that is Jarrell Casey. They've got a couple of young linebackers that look good, but they play the middle. They need edge rushers if they're going to be this great defense that we talk about this year.
Yep. They're definitely struggling on that side of the ball. We hope Casey comes back completely healthy from his injury. But I think the number one focus is get Mariota weapons on the outside. Yes, Coleman, you're going to tell me, can be a number one receiver somewhere or there. That's great. But he has not had enough time, or whatever the scheme is around him, where he cannot get the ball to open receivers. Because I watched a lot of these Titans game in live, and there's open receivers, and he just doesn't throw it there. There is some kind of miscommunication that Mariota is not getting in his helmet, from the coach to his helmet to his receivers. There needs to be a fix there. Until that happens, I don't care what you do on the run game. I don't care how much you rush the passer. If you can't throw the ball in today's NFL, you're not winning games.
And going back to even the Ken Wisenhunt years, they've been blaming the receivers for Mariota's mistakes. They're like, this guy ran the wrong route. Well, then why did Mariota throw it 28 yards over his head to the defender, the safety standing right behind him? I think he's the biggest issue going forward. I really do. I know I said defensive end, and that's a big one too.
Yeah.
But we're stuck with him, so that's why I didn't even mention it.
Sharif is he's poking at you, man. He said Mariota has a water pistol for an arm.
I don't think it's the deep throw ability. He can throw it deep. It's
just
who's going to catch the ball.
You're going to brush that off your shoulder, are you?
I am. It's not that. It's not that he can't throw it deep. It's just who's going to catch it when he does. And that's the biggest issue, I think, with Mariota is there's times where I don't even want to say it's boneheaded, because even boneheaded, like, you wouldn't make that mistake. There's times where a guy's got 5 yards worth of space, and then he throws it 10 yards over the guy's head right to the defender. Right. It looks like he's not an NFL caliber quarterback. And it sucks that it took us 4 years to figure this out. Well, it didn't take me that long. I was sitting there saying I didn't want to be a Titans fan if they drafted him. But
you do still got a great defense. You got Delaney Walker coming back. You know, hopefully he's even if he's 80% of what he used to be, he's still a stud in the NFL. Coleman has another year of development. I mean, it's a possibility that you might have a little bit more, but I think you're still missing a couple pieces on that offensive side of the ball.
I agree. They could use a veteran wide receiver. I still like the young guys. I know everyone's been down on Taywan Taylor. You've been down on Corey Davis. I think they're talented receivers.
No. I just don't think he's a number one receiver. That's the only thing I'm trying to say.
They're both very talented receivers. Corey Davis is probably the third or fourth best receiver in the NFL. I'm kidding about that, but he is a great receiver. And honestly, I think it's all quarterback. I think a lot of it comes from that end of the scheme where they just can't get the ball to these guys. They need to bring on a receiver. You're right, and they still need to sit there and fix the interior of the offensive line. Does that happen all in one offseason? Probably not. I'm probably dreaming, but who knows? Maybe J-Rob, the GM for the Tennessee Titans, can have as good of an offseason this year as he did the first year he got here when they traded for DeMarco Murray for nothing.
Right. I mean, it's definitely a possibility. Let's move on. At number 14, we have the Houston Texans. Playoff team.
God, that hurt.
Playoff team, not even in the top 10. I'll tell you why. Their offensive line. It is atrocious. We all know it. If it wasn't for how tough the AFC South is, they probably shouldn't have been in the playoffs.
And Sharif said, wow, that's coming from a Titans fan. Look, Sharif, I'm a realist, man. If the Titans suck, I'm going to be the first one to tell you, okay? I know a lot a lot of people, when
After
it's their
telling
team,
you how great they could be.
They could be. They've got guys.
How great they could be.
But let me tell you why they won't be. A lot of guys look at their team with rose-colored glasses on because it's their team. They want them to be good.
Man.
I'm going to be honest with you. The
Sharif,
Titans,
14. Texans are at 14. How? They gave up the most ever sacks.
You got to remember, this is a Texas guy. You know, he's out there in is it Houston or is it Dallas?
He's in Houston. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember Texas. I didn't remember Houston specifically. But, man, you can't let Deshaun Watson take these hits. He had a partially deflated lung on one of these games because you let him get beat up.
I love Watson. I think the guy's a stud. I'm
not going to tell you I love him because I'm a Titans fan.
I think he's
a good quarterback.
The thing is you got to help him out. He can't do it, man. Yeah, I'm telling you, if it wasn't for how tough the AFC South is and how crappy the AFC side of the ball is, they should not have been in the playoffs. It's just honest. It's just how it is.
They went on a good run there for the year, but you can't consistently go on those runs when you're giving up sacks like that. They did it against a lot of subpar teams. They were beating teams like the Jets, and they weren't blowing them out. They were like escaping teams like the Jets. It was coming down to like the last possession and everything like that. So the Texans have some building. They need almost an entirely new offensive line. I mean, they really need to refresh that side of the ball. And on top of that, they got Jadeveon Clowney, who's going to be a free agent. They need brand new secondary players as well. Tyrann Mathieu out there. Kareem Jackson is not coming back from what I understand. They've got a lot of issues in the secondary. So even though they still got guys like J.J. Watt, even though they still got guys on the offensive side of the ball like Hopkins that can make an impact, you need to refresh that second tier of talent if they're going to be any better than number 14.
Shree says the O-line for Houston does not fit the skill set of Watson.
I don't think they fit the skill set of any quarterback because they let everybody through. No, I'll give you that. Yeah, I mean,
you're right.
I don't know,
but you can't let that happen. You can't. Is it Bill O'Brien then? I mean, there has to be something wrong with the coaching, the scheme, the ability of players that's going on. You don't give up the most sacks. I think it was the most sacks also in the playoffs, too. Yeah. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that was also correct.
I mean, Indy's defense basically ran roughshod over you, and then the Chiefs, kind of made that pretty laughable the next week, right? Yeah. I mean, we saw the gulf and talent that the Texans have between the Chiefs, which are the top of the AFC, and them.
And I'm not trying to knock this at any team, because if I looked at this team 2 years ago when they played the Patriots, they should have won that game. And when they played them, I was like, this can be one of the best teams in the NFL, and it just seemed to fall apart around them. So there is a lot of fixing that team needs to do on the offensive side of the ball. Their defense is still there. As long as J.J. Watt is trying to lead that charge, I think you guys will be kind of okay. They'll fix their secondary issues. They try to do that a little bit with Honey Badger, but that offensive side of the ball is bleeding everywhere.
Exactly. I mean, you gotta fix the pressure, and you got to keep this young guy healthy. Otherwise, we're gonna be talking about another Cam Newton story. We're gonna be talking about Derek Anderson, or Derek Carr. David Carr. Thank you. Another Houston quarterback. I was like,
who also got tore up by
sacks. It started
sacks.
with a D. I got that. That's what I was trying to say.
Also got tore up by sacks.
I mean, Houston needs to fix that quarterback pressure problem. If they don't do that, I mean, you're going to be in for another season where they're going to look okay at times because Deshaun Watson's a good quarterback, and you've got other weapons that can really impact the ball. Yeah. But you're not going to win a Super Bowl when you're getting hit this much.
Right. Let's move on. Number 13, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers.
And I know what you're saying, Sharif. How are the Steelers ahead of them?
Yeah.
With Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell leaving town.
I was trying to think why we did that, but then you reminded me.
It's because they still have Big Ben. They had Juju Smith-Schuster, who's still looking like a good wide receiver. They have James Conner, who's come on.
Who took a lot of the being double-teamed away from Brown. Juju had to cover a lot of that issue, and he seemed to do well without it.
The attention was on him this year. I mean, no Antonio Brown didn't have those highlight games that he's had in the past.
I think his mouth finally caught up to him. I think the Steelers got sick of it.
I totally agree, and not to mention you've got a defense at least in Pittsburgh that, even though they're not the best unit out there, they still have playmakers. They still have guys like TJ Watt, that can impact the ball. They can make things happen. They're a couple pieces away from being a better defense than they were this year, where we're talking about them being top 10 again.
Right.
So they're rebuilding the defense. They really are.
And everyone's going to sit there and tell you they're still missing that Ryan Shazier type of caliber player. Well, everyone's missing that in the NFL, but they're going to try to fix that this draft. Sharif said Tomlin needs to be fired. Man,
he mismanaged the situation, but then again, the guy's won you Super Bowls. I mean, he's absolutely been... You've been in the conversation every year with him. I don't think you can fire him.
If he has another year like this year, I absolutely believe that they'll fire him.
I think it's got to be at least 2.
But I think, that's will be the second year if he has another year.
No, I mean like another one, like another 2.
Think 3 years.
Because even 2 years down, I mean, you've been in the conversation for 10 years now with Tomlin.
Yeah,
I mean, the guy has kept you not just in...
As soon as you fire him, if he chooses to coach again, he's coaching right there that next season.
And that's what I'm saying. He's too good of a coach. My question is, if you fire him, who are you replacing him with that's better? And there's only a couple guys that you can name on the list. I get it. He didn't handle the situation very well in the locker room. He didn't do a good job of keeping the egos in check. Right. But sometimes you just do what you can do, right? And the rest kind of falls, by the wayside. I don't think they did a good job of it this year, but they still have Big Ben.
You'll see the Cardinals fire their head coach again in 1 year.
You might.
Just to bring in Tomlin.
You might. Absolutely. So, I don't know. I don't think you can get rid of Tomlin just yet.
Moving on. At number 12, we have the Baltimore Ravens. And the only reason I have them this high is John Harbaugh and how he puts that defense together year in and year out.
Well, a lot of it's on the defense. I'm going to pick a different spot of the ball that I like a lot, and that is the offensive line. Now, I'm not crazy about Lamar Jackson being the starting quarterback. I think picking a guy that has not consistently been able to throw an accurate pass is always a bad decision when you're in the NFL. And I didn't like Joe Flacco. I was pretty down on Joe Flacco beforehand, but I'd still roll with Joe Flacco before I go with Lamar Jackson, because right now you're running the most exotic wildcat in the NFL. The question is, are you going to be able to cook up enough creative plays to keep people guessing, or are they just going to stack the box, put 8 guys back there, and take away your running game? Because right now, you're not beating anybody over the top. You've got a couple halfway decent receivers with Crabtree. I know John Brown, I think, is up on contract again, going back to free agency, but you just have to figure out what are we going to do to make this creative enough where we're going to be able to run the ball 80% of the time.
We might lose Sharif as him passing out as a fan of our show. He is in disbelief that we're putting him at 12. Let me tell you this, man, and trust me, I love Lamar Jackson. I think that guy's great. I love what he brings to the NFL. He could tell you that because I constantly
he loves Lamar Jackson.
I constantly
fight
less. To keep him as one of the highlights of the NFL because I like what he brings. The thing is, they got to start putting him in passing situations. If they keep running the ball like he's talking about, this team isn't going to develop anywhere. Yes, they have great running backs with Gus Edwards and I'm blanking on the other guys.
Alex Collins. I mean, they have Buck Allen
the
as well.
way that those guys can run up the middle and break up the path of the running game is great. But until he can start throwing the ball, until he can start trusting his arm and that system, you are going to struggle. That defense is the only reason you guys were in the playoffs this year.
And Sharif says he can throw the deep ball, but I just don't believe it, man. There's a reason that when you went into the playoffs, I mean, they weren't trying to throw it all. You're throwing the ball like 15, 20 times a game.
I think he can throw it. The thing is do they believe in his arm to get it there? Do they believe
they believe it'll get there. The question is who's catching it out when it comes down.
Do they believe in his arm getting to where it needs to be? Because I don't think they believe in it. I really honestly don't.
I totally
understand. I think the move to getting rid of Joe Flacco, even though you didn't like it, is the right move. At some point in time, you got to move on. Joe Flacco wasn't winning it anymore for you. It was time to go on.
And you've tied your hands.
You got to figure out how to get this guy in the passing game or you won't succeed. That's why I have him at 12.
I didn't like the draft pick when you took him at 32, but you did. You took him. Now you need to give him a chance. I at least understand that from an organizational standpoint. I'm not crazy about it, man, because we talk about these windows closing all the time, and Baltimore has been one of those teams that the defense has been just stout for years now. The question is, eventually that dries up. Eventually that goes away. And the question is going to be, is Lamar Jackson going to be the guy like Russell Wilson that when that happens, he can still keep you in games, he can still keep you relevant, he can still get you close to where you might win a Super Bowl without that defense? I don't think so.
My best example to you is look what the Chargers did. They created a defense that literally stopped everything that they wanted to do. Don't get me wrong, what they were doing worked. They got the playoffs. But until they figured out how to do it, to stop them, a defense figured it out. Now there's a system out there.
Yeah.
Now there's a way to beat them. So now they got to go back to the drawing board and go, okay, Lamar,
now what do we do?
What can we do? What can we trust you to do? And that's the problem is that last game against the Chargers just showed me the Ravens have a lot of issues on the offensive side of the ball.
Number 11, Drew. The Atlanta Falcons. This is an interesting pick. You're going to sit there and say, they didn't have a good year this year. But the defense was all out. I mean, pretty much every playmaker on their defense got hurt this year except for Grady Jarrett.
Offensive players were out.
Yeah, exactly. But what happened? Matt Ryan threw for almost 5,000 yards. That's going to come back next year. You're going to get Devontae Freeman back. You've got the best defensive draft class that we've had in years now. And you better believe the Falcons, I think, are going to stack up on the defensive side of the ball with Dan Quinn as their head coach. If they can refresh this defense, if they can put a pretty good product on the field, they don't have to be great, but if they're halfway decent on defense, and you've got Matt Ryan throwing the ball all over the lot, this team's going to be back in the playoffs. That's why we have them ahead of the Ravens, because their passing prowess has been so great, and because of this upcoming draft, with all these defensive players out there, they're going to find the fix, I think.
Yeah, and on the opposite side of the ball, which in my opinion, it only got better when Calvin Ridley's getting another year with Matt Ryan. You're getting Freeman back. Yeah, Coleman might be gone, but you can pick up a young running back later in the draft that will just replace him.
And let's face it, Coleman was the number 2 to Freeman.
Absolutely.
Freeman was the better running back pretty much the entire time. They didn't like Freeman as much. They wanted Coleman to be the guy, but even they had to admit, he's not the number 1.
Right. Sharif wants to go back to Baltimore real quick. He says, with George Roman as the new offensive coordinator in Baltimore, he thinks we'll see what happens. I hope so, man.
I don't think he's a bad hire.
I hope so.
But the problem is they're trying to play 1980s football in a league that, rewards the pass and kind of penalizes the run. So
1970s.
I like the counterpunch. I like the counterpunch because when the entire league goes one way and you go the other way, it's hard to game plan against you. It's hard to stop that, especially when you talk about linebackers getting smaller and faster. But it's a big risk, man. I just think you should be able to throw the ball a little bit, and I'm not crazy about the Lamar Jackson at center, and that's the reason I have them this low. I'm going to be honest with you. If you brought in Nick Foles, I think this Ravens team would be like a 5, 6, 7 spot easy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You throw in a quarterback that can throw the ball and who's proven a winner in postseason, absolutely. Problem is, it's not there. But I wouldn't go off and trade Lamar Jackson for Nick Foles. I would not. I would stick with what you got. I know you don't like that. I would stick with what you got.
What would I do if I'm the Ravens?
Give him another
GM.
year or two and figure it out. You already spent the draft pick. You traded up for it. It is what it is. You move forward with it.
My question is, how much do I have to pay Nick Foles? Because if I have to pay Nick Foles $30 million, you're right. I wouldn't trade Lamar Jackson for that. But if I had to pay him $20, I'd seriously consider it, Drew.
If he was 120, he'll just stay in Philly.
Now, Sharif says, good call with the Falcons. He's right on board with us with that pick. But who do we have ahead of the Falcons squad?
Number 10, the Philadelphia Eagles. What was that look? The reason why we have them at number 10 is because we don't know where they are with the quarterback situation. If Nick Foles stays, this is why I have him at number 10. If he
Let me pump the brakes a little bit. That's not the only reason. Yeah, you've got Nick Foles moving out, but you've got Brandon Graham, who's likely to leave unless he takes a hometown discount and gets paid less to stay with Philadelphia. You have Ronald Darby, the only good player in that secondary, who's also leaving. You've got Jay Ajayi, your best running back, where in a team that couldn't run the ball anyway, who's also leaving, especially without Ajayi. You've got a lot of issues on this Philadelphia team, and you have no money to address it. They're not going to be a team that sits there and has a great off-season and they sign a bunch of guys. They need to do this through the draft. They need to hit on some young guys
and
that factor in right away.
And that's what we're going to talk about, because we talk about the draft every time we bring it up. Is defensive talent is all over the place here on this draft. There it is. It's all there. They're cheap talent. They can hopefully Jim Schwartz, who has done very well as their defensive coordinator, won them a Super Bowl, can go out there.
Don't remind me. He was a great Titans defensive coordinator until we let him go.
Can go out there and pick some of these players and bring them in and replace some of these veterans. Do I think it's a big issue they're losing them? Yes. But if they can keep Nick Foles there, because Carson Wentz obviously can't stay healthy, they can keep both those quarterbacks, there's no reason to talk about this team not being back in the playoffs again. Yes, the defensive side of the ball is scary, but this draft helps that situation.
I agree, and they need wide receivers, and like I said, by the time they come around in the draft spot, those wide receivers are going to be looking a lot more enticing. Maybe they get the first one off the board. I think they're picked 25 or something, somewhere around that area. They need wide receivers. That's about when the first wide receiver comes off the board, in my opinion, in this draft. Unless people reach. I know you were higher on the wide receivers of this class than I was.
I just picked needs.
But I just don't think anyone's going to go reach for a wide receiver. Maybe they get the best guy in the draft, and we're talking about a quick turnaround here. I think they need to have a great draft if they're going to stay up there. But they still have talent. You know, they still have Carson Wentz, who's still looking like the best young quarterback in the NFL, minus Patrick Mahomes, sorry. Second best quarterback in the NFL.
He's already a veteran.
Okay. But they have the quarterback, which is the most important part of the puzzle. The offensive line isn't the worst thing in the world, even though they didn't play very well this year. And then they have Alshon Jeffrey, great wide receiver. They have the defensive line that's good. They have some needs still, but this team has the top-end talent that if you get guys that are halfway decent, they're going to be good.
Sharif brought up a great point here. Eagles need a running back. They do, but I want you to think about something. They're in the playoffs. They were one catch away from a playoff win without a running back. Think about that.
Well, they got a playoff win. It took a missed field goal, but they got a playoff win. I get what you're saying. They were one play away from maybe going to the NFC Championship, which absolutely true, Drew. I totally understand that. Jerry, good to see you too, man. Hey, and he likes your hoodie.
Thanks, man.
Jerry, we don't need any more Chiefs fans. Okay, no, I'm kidding. But going on top of that, what you were saying about the Eagles, yes, I believe they're absolutely a dangerous team. I don't think they're quite as dangerous as they were 2 years ago when they won the Super Bowl, or 2 seasons ago, I should say. But I still think they're a team that's going to be a threat. I still put them a little bit ahead of the Falcons because they have less building to do, and because they already have the star talent there.
They do. They got some holes, but hopefully, like we said, this defensive side of the draft can fill a lot of those up, and they can fill it up real cheap because, yes, they're right up against that cap. At number 9, we have Seattle Seahawks.
This is your pick, Drew. Go ahead.
I like this pick only because of Russell Wilson. I am a full believer in this guy. I also like a guy named Tyler Lockett coming out of Kansas State that he likes to criticize me about. One of the best red zone targets in the NFL. Look it up. It's true. This guy, regardless of what that team has around him, seems to constantly putting up wins, constantly put him into playoff spots. Just imagine if they can get other players around him from this defensive talented draft, which they definitely need desperately. This team could be scary.
It's coming at the right time. I mean, absolutely. They need to rebuild this defense, and this is the draft to do it. They finally got a bit of an offensive line for Russell Wilson. They're finally able to run the ball a little bit, and lo and behold, the offense looks pretty good. I get it. Russell Wilson didn't put up his biggest numbers of the year, but he didn't have to because the running game was as strong as it was. They're a couple of draft picks away from being a great team. They need to work on this pass rush. That's the biggest need for them this year. Their best guy, Frank Clark, is also a free agent. Whether they bring him back, or whether they just decide to invest heavily in edge rushers in the draft, that remains to be seen. But again, their biggest need is one of the biggest strengths in the draft. They have their draft picks. I think the Seahawks are going to be a challenge again next year for that NFC West. Do I see them competing directly with the Rams? maybe a step behind them, but I still think they're a good team that played the Rams close twice this year and may play them close twice next year as well.
Yeah, Sharif agrees with you. He thinks the Seahawks are going to get the Ram Fitz next year. He capitalized every letter in Fitz.
Well, they did this year. I mean, they were within a touchdown of beating them both times, and it came down to the last drive almost every time.
My last point, if you watched any of the Pro Bowl skill sets and you watched Russell Wilson throw that ball, yes, he's not under rest. He doesn't have people diving at him and all that stuff. That guy is the most accurate quarterback during that stuff. I mean, that guy is a stud.
Don't tell Drew Brees that. But anyway.
That's during game.
I like the Seahawks pick. I don't know. I think that 9, 10, 11 spot are really close to each other. I think there are 3 teams, and they're all birds, ironically, that could absolutely, just trade spots. You could put any one of those teams in one of those spots, and I couldn't necessarily fight you that much for it because they're all great teams. They've got a little building to do, so they're not quite in that upper echelon yet. But if they play their cards right this offseason, they might return there.
All right, at number 8. This is kind of a controversial pick for both of us here. We have the Dallas Cowboys.
But then we were like, who's better than them? I mean, my biggest question for the Cowboys, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're
but my
good.
biggest questions for the Cowboys is the offense going to be this good next year? Are you going to get more out of Zeke Elliott? Is he going to look good? Are you going to get, Amari Cooper to look as great as he did at times this year? That's my biggest question.
My biggest question is, can that defense keep up exactly what it was doing and winning these big games? That's the issue, because that is what helped this team. Yeah, the offense showed up every now and then, but it was the defense that was the consistency of this team's success. So if it can happen, it has to keep happening on that defensive side of the ball, but they're going to need more help in that secondary.
I absolutely agree. I think the secondary is one thing that needs to be refreshed. They need DeMarcus Lawrence back, too, because he's the heart and soul of their pass rush. If they get him back, and I think the Cowboys are still going to be dangerous next year. We're still going to be talking about them as a top defense. And then maybe their offense strings it along. Maybe they bring in another receiver. I'd like to see him bring back Cole Beasley as well because he seems to fit that system and he seems to work well with Dak Prescott. If they can do all those things, I think the Cowboys might be able to make an NFC Championship push. Am I being a little too bold here?
You might be. Sharif says Dak cannot throw the deep ball.
No, Dak is not a great passer, but when you have a great defense and you have a good running game, and if your offensive line can get back to form, I know they had a bad 8 weeks at the beginning of the season this year, but if they can get back to business, it doesn't matter who your quarterback is. Even in the NFL, you can get by with a subpar guy as long as he's not throwing a pick every play. And Dak, say what you want about him, he's still not as bad as the worst caliber guys in the NFL.
At number 7, we have the Colts. Andrew Luck, that great draft they had this last year. Yeah, they're missing some pieces, but
stop, Drew. My heart can only take so much, okay?
This team, if they can draft again anywhere near that the way they drafted last year, but now they get to do it on the right side of the ball because they need defensive help, watch out.
It's like I said, Daddy came home for the AFC South. I mean, Andrew Luck, back from that injury, looked exactly like he did before he left, and it just shows you this is still a quarterback-driven league. I know you just heard me say Dak Prescott isn't a need for the Cowboys, but I mean, Andrew Luck pretty much did it with a subpar roster. You look at the rest of these guys, except for Darius Leonard and the way he's playing, who stood out? Maybe T.Y. Hilton?
But he was hurt.
Other than that, nobody was really lighting it up, and yet they were winning games, and they were doing it.
Mac did show up a little bit late.
But he was hit or miss. He'd either have 200 yards or he'd have 23. I mean, there was no in between. So, I mean, Andrew Luck is the heart and soul of this team. If he stays healthy, they're going to be dangerous next year. It's like Drew said. They have all these draft picks. They have all this money for the offseason. If they play their cards right, the Colts, they can challenge teams like the Chiefs and the Patriots and the Chargers, who we haven't talked about yet, for the championship in the AFC.
And this could be another Bell sighting or another Antonio Brown sighting. Who knows? They have plenty of room for him.
It could be
there
on the defensive side. Maybe you go see them sign somebody like Clowney and get a legitimate pass rusher over there.
Sharif's got a couple things to break your heart. He says this is the best offensive line in the league and that they're going to win the South next year.
Now, the only thing I will say, he's probably right about the South. The only thing I will say about the offensive line is it comes and goes. Look at Dallas. 2 years ago, we were talking about Dallas is unbeatable, even though they're paying these guys as the best offensive line that we've ever maybe seen in the NFL for the past 10 years. Then this year, we're talking about how they're like a mid-range group. So, yes, the Colts were one of the best offensive lines this year, absolutely. Now, everything gets reset. Next year's a new year. The question is, are they going to be able to sustain? Because a lot of these guys that were good this year weren't so great the years before. The only thing that changed was Quentin Nelson coming in. That's my biggest issue with the Colts.
And the right tackle.
My biggest issue with the Colts is, are they going to look exactly the same on the offensive line? I'm not sure about that, but if they do, you're absolutely right. They're going to win the AFC South.
Moving on, number 6, we have the Chicago Bears. Bees, I don't know if you're with us. Are you okay with the Bears being number 6?
I honestly want to put them a little bit higher.
Are you guys drafting a kicker?
I thought about putting them one spot higher, or 2 spots higher, I should say. But then again, the Bears, that defense is absolutely stout. It's probably the best unit in the NFL when it comes to defense. Some people are going to debate, but I think it is the Chicago Bears. They're absolutely fantastic. Mitch Trubisky looked good, and he looked pretty competent. I'm not saying he's a world beater, but he absolutely looked good with the weapons he has. They have Allen Robinson, one of the best signings from last year, in my opinion. And they're going to go get another wide receiver, I think. I think if they bring in another weapon for Matt Nagy and this offense to get a little bit more creative with, they're going to be good. They're going to be a really good team. The question is, does Trubisky take that step forward? I think he can. The question is, will he?
He says you're high. We're high. They're a top 5, huh? They're one spot out of there, man.
It's not like we had him at 23, right?
I give him another year, Trubisky, with Matt Nagy and that system and his receivers and Trey Burton. Figure out what you guys are going to do with Howard. You can't sit there and let a talent like that not be used. You've got to utilize them. Cohen will not be your consistent cowbell. I don't care how you think you look at it or how well he did. He won't do it year in and year out. You've got to figure out how to utilize these players and get Trubisky to utilize them as well. If you can figure that out, this team is a top 3 team, no doubt about it, because that defense makes you that good. It's the offensive side of the ball that you're struggling at. And you've seen spurts of it. You've seen Trubisky go off. He couldn't do it consistently until he can figure out how to do that. And I think it does take time, which he's going to have. This team can do that. But until, I see him at number 6.
Bees also says he can't wait till they play a Chief. I smell a beer bet in the making on that one. But I agree. I think these other teams, well, like I said, I was debating putting them a couple spots higher. I was debating... But you talked me into it. I mean, I agree. I think on paper, when you look at what they can do, I think the Bears are a great team next year, that they need one more step forward from their young quarterback. If they get that, we're going to be talking about them in the NFC Championship / Super Bowl next year.
I would love a Chiefs and Bears showdown because I'd like to take another number 1 defense down. All right? We took 2 last year. We'll take another one next year. I don't know if they're playing. I don't think they are. But love to see it.
Moving on to number 5, we've got the Rams. And Drew, I know what you're going to say. Everyone's going to be sitting there telling me. The Bears beat the Rams in the regular season. I get it. All right? It was 15-9. They played in Chicago. And for the Bears, they're like, this is the Super Bowl. We're blowing this team up. This matters to us. The Rams are like, this is week 12. Who cares? We're going to the playoffs. We're like 10-1 at this point, 11-1. Honestly, I don't really put a lot of stock in that one regular season game. I look at what they do, and I look at what the Rams can do on both the offensive side of the ball and a little bit on the defensive side of the ball, because we haven't talked about that. We talked about how the Rams didn't show up on offense for the Super Bowl, only scoring 3 points, but we're not talking about how the Rams held this Patriots team that just got done blowing out the Chargers and the Chiefs and held them to 13 points.
We're giving Sharif another aneurysm in his brain. Man, right now, we don't know where Gurley is. I mean, is he mentally broken down? Is he physically broken down? What about Kupp? You didn't have Kupp there. You need to bring Kupp back into the whole scheme of it. That will help your offense get a little better. But then when you look at the defense side of the ball, you don't know if Sue's staying. Dominic Sue might be going on. You got other defensive talent around there that's looking for big paychecks that you can't really afford to pay right now. There's a little bit of an issue. So, do you know who you keeping, who are you not? Then obviously your draft's going to help you a little bit, but you're picking down there at 31. That's one good pick, but the next pick's going to be 62. So what are you going to get from everything when you're losing so much, and how healthy is Gurley? Big question marks.
I think I'm still going to take the Rams. I mean, he's asking Rams at 5. Who would you take that's behind them? Who would you put ahead of them? I know B's going to say the Bears, but look, I just think head-to-head, if you played in a postseason game where either you're playing in L.A. or at a neutral site for the Super Bowl, and I get it wouldn't happen, but if you were playing at a neutral site, I think I'd give the edge to the Rams. I still like the Bears. I just don't think offensively they have enough to play well or outside of Soldier Field to beat this team. Mitch Trubisky at home is a much better quarterback than Mitch Trubisky on the road. And then again, on top of it, you still only scored 15 points. Let's not pretend like the Rams' defense was absolutely studly throughout the regular season. You still only got 15 points against them. I get it. The defense showed up, but defense comes and goes. There will be games where you don't have a great game defensively. Offense is, at least at this point, seems to be where the league is heading.
This is the team they're going to tell it, because this was my pick. At number 4, I got the L.A. Chargers.
Yeah, this is your pick. I wanted to put them a little bit lower.
This is the team they're going to say that's the team that they could be above. I don't see it, man. I know they got beat by the Patriots, but who didn't get beat by the Patriots? They won the Super Bowl. It's Patriots. I mean, This team was scary. No one wanted to face this team. They took the number 1 defense in the Ravens, and they beat them. Not only did they beat them, they soundly beat them. This team is scary, and the only issue with it is you got to think about it, they're getting their number 1 cornerback. They're going to come back, and they're going to be a healthy running back because Melvin Gordon was not healthy. I don't think Keenan Allen was 100% healthy. They're also going to get Hunter Henry back. You're talking about getting all these players back that they were missing, and these are
and then having them injured by the end of next year.
Well, they might be, but yeah. But that's not happening just yet.
Yeah, I agree. When you look at them on paper, they should be scary, but they're a team that just doesn't have it, and you don't know what it is, but they don't have it. I don't know. I look at this Chargers team. They need a little bit of help in the inside. Still, I'd like to see them draft a defensive tackle, but can you imagine if they get somebody like the D tackle out of Clemson, whose name I'm drawing a blank on, Dexter Lawrence, who was suspended, who can rush the passer as well. You're going to be talking about a scary pass rush out of this Chargers team. But that being said, I don't know. The Chargers, for me, they're a team that doesn't have it. I get why you put them up there. I was saying they were fool's gold beforehand, and I was kind of right. I mean, the Patriots kind of exposed them a little bit. I don't know, man. They're a team that, on paper, you look at this team, they're dangerous. Yeah. So that's why on our power rankings, I think we need to put them at number 4. But then again, if they were playing the Bears, they were playing the Rams, somebody like that, do I think they beat them?
It'd be a tough game.
It would be tough. That's what I would say, too.
All right, moving on. At number 3, we had the Kansas City Chiefs.
Well, props to you for putting the Chiefs at 3, Drew. That was very mature of you. I honestly thought you were going to come at me with the Chiefs at number 1. But they have questions on the defensive line. D Ford, maybe a free agent. I know they've expressed interest in re-signing him. But again, he could hold him hostage. He could sit there and say, I'm going to go play for somebody like Detroit who's going to pay me an awful lot of money to go be their pass rusher, and you're probably not going to be able to match once you paid guys like Tyreek Hill.
They're going to have a little bit of issues. What I see is them signing Tyreek Hill, them signing Chris Jones, and franchising tag D Ford for right now. I think that's probably going to be the way they go. It's the way I think they should go. I think all 3 of them should be around. The thing I think the most important is D Ford's the one that's contract's up. But Chris Jones and Tyreek Hill are all looking for big contracts too.
Now, Corey also says he has faith in the Chargers, and they need help on the offensive line. Says they need a linebacker or another safety, and Travis Benjamin and Jason Verrett. Also keep Tyrell Williams. Yeah, Tyrell Williams, that's another exit that, people aren't really talking about. He's been one of the quietest receivers in the NFL that's really made impacts. But he also plays the kind of same game as Keenan Allen. And when Keenan Allen's healthy, I think they're kind of at a loss on who to use. So do I think he comes back? More than likely not. I think somebody's going to open the wallet enough where he's going to go want to seek greener pastures. You're right about the offensive line, though, Corey. Absolutely. They need to rebuild that. And then Travis Benjamin and Verrett, yeah, it'd be great to have them back. I mean, that's going to be the question. Can they stay healthy? Can they play a whole year?
When you look at the receiving core, man, I don't think you got too much to worry about. You got Phillip Rivers back there. You got a first ballot Hall of Famer. More than likely, that guy will be in there, or after 5 years he retires. It does not matter who's out there. You need Keenan Allen out there because that's where defenses gravitate to. But beyond that, underneath him, I don't think you really have to worry about it. You're gonna have.
They're going to find a way to make it work.
You're going to have Hunter Henry out there. He's going to also demand some double teams. Whoever that is, it's going to work out.
Sharif has a question for the Chiefs. Who's faster, Dante Hall or Tyreek Hill?
No, Tyreek Hill.
I agree with you. I think Tyreek Hill's the quickest guy in the NFL.
Hall was elusive, and he was hard to find. Hill's just a speed demon, man. He's just so much quicker. Back to the Chiefs for quick. The reason I couldn't put him at number 1, even though my heart tells me to, is that defense. There's no doubt about it. But they're bringing in Steve Spagnuolo, the guy that used to be the defensive coordinator with Andy Reid, who the reason they did so well and got to a lot of NFC championships, and I believe he was also the defensive coordinator when they went to the Super Bowl, was because of that defense. And obviously the offense Andy Reid was calling as well, made Steve Spagnuolo go off and have runs at a head coaching job. Now he's finally back with Andy Reid. Maybe he could turn this around. Maybe he can change the scheme in the middle of a game, something Bob Sutton couldn't do, and change his defense around. There is a lot of key pieces on that defense, but there is a lot of help they need as well. Luckily in this draft, they can figure out how to utilize that.
Yeah, I think they're going to go heavy on the defensive back end of the draft. I think you're going to see them kind of counterpunch. You see, by the time they pick, there's going to be a lot of defensive players off the board already. Maybe they can grab the second or third best cornerback off the draft, rebuild on the back end of the defense, and then we're talking about the Chiefs being more dangerous, especially if they can keep guys like D Ford around.
And real quick, Sharif, I'll answer your second question. You should actually go watch the Dante Hall interviewing of Tyreek Hill. It's a great interview. Those two guys interview each other. You'll probably enjoy that interview. And then his question is, will the Chiefs bring back Hunt? If you're talking about Akeem Hunt, it's a possibility. If you're talking about Kareem Hunt, no way.
It'll be a Frosty Friday in hell.
No way, dude. No way.
Yeah, I mean, do they beat the Patriots with Kareem Hunt?
Probably.
I think so, too.
Yeah.
I do. I think they get it done. Now, moving on, we don't have to dwell on the Chiefs all day long. Who do we have at the number 2 spot?
Number 2.
Again, might be a little controversial.
It's going to be a controversial. I got the New England Patriots. And I'll tell you why. It's because I can't keep putting them at number 1, even though they keep showing up that they should be. I think there's going to be a little bit of an issue. Is Rob Gronkowski moving on? If he does move on, teams don't have to focus that position. It allows that safety to cover someone like Julian Edelman. Don't get me wrong, teams were trying to do that anyways, but they were just doing it with the wrong scheme, especially my Chiefs were, especially the Rams were. But they got to figure out how to cover both those guys. Now, with him gone, yeah, they'll replace him with someone. Yeah, he'll probably put up some numbers, but I'd rather have some no-name guy trying to put up numbers instead of Gronkowski putting up numbers, because you know what Gronkowski used to be able to do, and that's tear other teams' defenses apart.
Now, one thing about releasing Gronkowski, if he does actually move on, is it's going to save them a lot of cap space. They're going to get about $10 million back after his dead cap money. So they're going to use that money on other players is the thing. But they've got guys like Trey Flowers coming up. They have other guys like Danny Shelton that might not return next year. They've got questions. Jason McCourty, who played well, made one of the best plays in the Super Bowl that nobody's talking about, is where he broke up that pass in the end zone for the Rams. If the Rams catch that touchdown there, we're talking about a different game. So they've got guys that are leaving, but they have like 11 or 12 draft picks this offseason to sit there and bring in a bunch of these new young guys that they get to pick. They've got a bunch of them at the top end of the draft as well. The Patriots are going to be able to refresh this team this year. I think if we were going to beat the Patriots, or anyone was going to beat the Patriots, this was the chance, man, and we blew it. I really do feel that way.
They're number 2. They're number 2 because the number 1 in our power ranking this early in the offseason is the New Orleans Saints.
One thing I don't like about the Saints is they're not going to have a lot of money to make moves. I think they need another receiver or two to truly be dangerous. I like Traquan Smith. I don't think Traquan Smith's a number 2 yet. I think he's a number 3 wide receiver. They need to get a legitimate number 2, not Ted Ginn, in there to play across from their stud wide receiver, whose name I am drawing a blank on, but we all know and love.
Yeah, we're all drawing a blank on him right now. Luckily, when I think I'll come up with it, or someone will tell us, luckily for them, where they're picking in this draft, it's not a reach down there to pick a wide receiver. Maybe at this point in time in the draft, they could pick the best wide receiver that's down there, and then it's not going to be that big of an issue. Because on the defensive side of the ball, even though they could use some help, it's not that big of a need over there that it is on the opposite side of the ball. They still have Alvin Kamara. Yes, they might lose Ingram, but maybe they can pick up another young power back that can do the...
Running backs are replaceable. Absolutely. It's the easiest replaced position in the NFL. And I got to say this about the Saints. Even though they're not going to get any better necessarily...
Michael Thomas.
They're already... Thank you, Michael Thomas. Even though they're not going to get any better, you don't necessarily need to when you got this much talent on there. If they bring in another weapon or two for Drew Brees to be able to spread the ball around like he used to, we might be talking about the Saints winning that game against the Rams, pass interference or not.
Oh, man, we got big words coming out of Bees. He said Patriots are going to blow next year along with the Saints. Their quarterbacks had their last year this year. Mark my words.
We'll mark it. I'm just saying. I don't necessarily believe it.
I'll screenshot my phone. Dude. Okay, I'll give you this. Tom Brady definitely looked tired. Definitely looked
and Drew Brees
old.
did too. After the Cowboys game, I think Drew Brees looked a little fatigued too. The offense kind of slowed down a little bit.
But Drew Brees was putting up MVP caliber numbers prior to looking that.
True.
Tom Brady was always looking like that to me, majority of the year. Maybe minus like 2 or 3 games. That's it.
Short of the injury bug, I don't think they're quite there yet. I think the teams around them, the schemes.
He says, you know I'm right.
The organizations, man, they are all dangerous. I don't think you can sit there and say that the Patriots and the Saints are just going to go away and their quarterbacks aren't going to be relevant next year.
I fully believe in Drew Brees. I don't think he's going to be I don't think he's going to be anywhere being done. Shree says, I hate to be the teams on their schedule. The Saints are either going to be 14-2 or 15-1.
They're going to be. It's a tough one.
I'm right there with you, man. Mm-hmm. I completely agree with you. I think
I don't know. They might not lose to Tampa Bay this year.
Yeah. Well, that first week is really tough to pick. Everyone knows that.
It absolutely is. They're going to be dangerous next year. That's why they're top in the top of our power rankings. Well, Drew, any final thoughts here, man?
I still think my Chiefs are number 1.
This is going to change. This is my final thoughts. These power rankings are going to change when guys sign people in free agency. When we get to the draft and we're drafting people as well. So these teams aren't locked in by any means, but I think this is a good start to where everybody's at. I can't wait to see what the offseason holds for them and where everybody kind of shifts going into next season.
No promises where this time we'll actually start to update them, but through drafts, free agency, and through all that kind of stuff, we will start rotating them and we might even go back over it in an episode just to recap how we are, let you guys know what we're thinking, and let us know how much you think we're wrong or right.
Absolutely. And we're definitely keeping track of the whole Breeze and Brady are going to be bad by next year.
No doubt about that.
I'd take that beer bet. Let me say that. I'd take that. Anyway, guys, for Sports Around the Bar, we got some special thanks here before we get out of here. Drew, go ahead.
Yeah, guys, remember, always like, share, comment, add your friends in the conversation. We love talking sports with you. Real quick, just a special thanks to Andrew, Thomas, Ryan, Bees, Sharif, Matthew, Jerry, Corey. You guys are all awesome. Thank you so much for joining us on tonight's episode.
Show's always better with you guys. We appreciate all the comments, all the shares, all the likes. As always, I'm Jake, your bartender, and this is Drew, and we will see you guys next time.
See ya. Hang
on one sec.
We're
still